No nativity scene that you have in your house is complete without them, right? The three wise men. Yet we are so accustomed to seeing their presence, but we might not be as accustomed to saying, why are they there? Why is this recorded? Why did they visit? What's the significance? Before we begin, before we read, we're going to be in Matthew chapter 2, looking at the first 12 verses. What are some things that we tend to get wrong about these Gentile visitors when we rely more on tradition, more on Christmas songs, more on nativity scenes than we do the actual Bible? What are a few details we tend to get wrong? Yeah, that they were actually there. The Bible actually doesn't seem to indicate that they were there the actual night of the birth. You'll see in today's text, they refer to Jesus as a child. He's probably somewhere between very, very young and infant up to 2 years old. They refers to a house. It just seems like Joseph and Mary didn't move out of Bethlehem quickly once they were there, that they were settled in there for a little while. What else might we get wrong?
You don't know that there's three of them.
Yeah, we have no idea that there's three. Why do we say that there's three? Yeah, there's three gifts, so a lot of times it's assumed that there's three. We have no idea. There could have been many, many more than that. There could have been three. There's some traditions that talk about that, but we really don't know. Anything else that we tend to get wrong? We three kings of Orient are... Yeah, they were not kings. They were not kings. That is actually a much later tradition. But what's interesting is it's a tradition that probably leans into some Old Testament prophecy. Okay, so you have Psalm 72, Isaiah 60. I'll be reading a couple verses out of those chapters this morning. But they were not kings. We only get 2 chapters in Matthew. 2 chapters in Matthew and 2 chapters in Luke, 2 of the Gospels, 2 chapters each, that give us some insight about Jesus' birth. And even with that, they kind of share it with a lot of economy, especially Matthew. He's just like, yeah, Jesus was born. All right, but about Jesus' birth and Jesus' early days. But Matthew feels that within that very limited framework, this is an important story to tell. This is an important story to tell. So we'll just kind of tease out a little bit why that may be this morning. So we'll read the first 8 verses. Again, this is in the Gospel of Matthew, the first gospel in the New Testament, chapter 2. After Jesus was born, again, like I said, he says it with a lot of economy. After Jesus was born in Bethlehem in Judea, during the time of King Herod, Magi from the east came to where? Jerusalem. Pay attention to the details. And asked, where is the one who has been born King of the Jews? Who is they asking? Who are they asking? They're asking King Herod, who, by the way, was referred to as King of the Jews or King of Judea. So they're asking a king of the Jews, hey, where's this king of the Jews that's meant to be born, okay? We saw his star in the, where? In the east, and have come to worship him. When King Herod heard this, he was what? Disturbed. Disturbed. And all, what? Jerusalem with him. When he had called together all the people's chief priests and teachers of the law, okay, so the Bible scholars of their day, the religious leaders of their day, he asked them where the Christ or the Messiah, the anointed one, was to be born. Where's this king? Where's this Messiah going to be born? They know, right? They know the scriptures in Bethlehem, in Judea, right? They replied, for this is what the prophet has written. It's interesting. This is out of, there's so many details here. This is out of Micah. But the last line is kind of a paraphrase. Matthew plays with this a little bit. It's also the last line, the way he phrases it, is out of 2 Samuel, referring to David being shepherd over his people. He says, but you, Bethlehem, in the land of Judah, okay, this was going to be a king in the line of David. He was going to be of the royal line of Judah, are by no means least among the rulers of Judah. For out of you will come a ruler who will be the shepherd of my people Israel. Then Herod called the Magi secretly and found out from them the exact time the star had appeared. He sent them to Bethlehem and said, and maybe you can hear Harry Colgrove's voice in this. Matt was Herod, the last live nativity. I just always kind of picture that. He says to them, go and make a careful search for the child. As soon as you find him, report to me so that I too may go and worship him. Now, most likely the people that lived in the area would have been like, what? Not okay. But these are foreigners. They don't really know any better. They don't live in the area. Okay. All right. We'll trust you, Herod. Verse 1 sets the stage for this new scene after the birth of Jesus Messiah. And we have two new characters that are held in stark contrast. Again, this is very, very purposeful. We have Gentile Magi, and we have King Herod. Now, who are they? Anybody want to guess how many Herods there are in the Bible, in the New Testament? How many Herods are referenced? Just make a guess. Yeah, who said 6? Good job. Is there a reference? Do you have like that written down or something? That's very good. So there's actually right around 6, we think, and that would include Philip, who's referred to, I think, in the Gospel of Mark just as Philip, but he actually was Herod Philip. So there's a lot of Herods mentioned in the Bible. This is Herod the Great. This is Herod the Great, okay? He was a really interesting character. You can look up his history a little bit. He was a very ambitious builder. He actually seemed to kind of try and garner favor from the people by some of the building projects he did. He did really extensive renovations on the Second Temple in Jerusalem. But this King Herod was not an honorable man, and he was not an honorable ruler. He was actually, in fact, appointed by Rome. He kind of played the political game, in some ways not too different than today. He was rich, he had connections, and he got appointed by Rome to be the king of Judea, or the king of the Jews, but kind of a puppet king under the Roman Empire. Was he Jewish? No, he was not even fully Jewish. His father was an Edomite. Okay, so he was Arab. The Edomites actually descended from Esau. This Herod was not even fully Jewish. He would not have been considered Jewish. He was Jewish. He would say he was Jewish by religion. Actually, that region in history was forced into Judaism, but that's a whole nother story. He would say he was Jewish and had converted to Judaism religiously, but he was not ethnically Jewish. This Herod was known to be a paranoid tyrant. He was not afraid to kill people. That's what history tells us. Anyone that he considered a threat to his rule was not safe. In fact, he was known to have killed the last remnants of the family that ruled before him. During his time, he had 3 of his own sons killed. He had a wife killed. He had his mother-in-law, his mother-in-law killed, okay? And he had, at one point, he killed over half the Sanhedrin, had 300 court officers put to death, and many, many others that he considered threats to his power. Not a nice guy, not a nice guy. Now the Magi are introduced as a group of Magi from the East. The original term is Persian, and it's likely that they were from that region, Babylon, Persia, somewhere from that region. They likely traveled 1,000 miles, maybe more. Some estimates would put it even higher than that. And this would have been a journey probably at that time over many months. Historically, Magi were known for their wisdom and their ability to interpret prophecies, signs, and the stars, okay? And these were not kind of just, These were well-respected people. They were often members of like courts in pagan settings. They were highly trusted advisors to many kings. Some believe that the 7 wise men who understood the times from Persia and Media, who were called by King Xerxes in Esther 1, if you remember that story, would have been magi. As well as the magicians, enchanters, and astrologers that King Nebuchadnezzar sought wisdom from, but couldn't hold the candle to who? Daniel, right? Daniel and his friends, if you remember that story. In fact, in Daniel 2:48, it says that eventually King Nebuchadnezzar placed Daniel in charge of all his wise men, his magi. And some actually believe that the wise men here, this is 500-600 years later, were still influenced by what Daniel had taught during that time of exile, all the Jews, right, in Babylon, what Daniel had taught concerning the God of Israel. Very interesting possibility. Now, many wonder what did they see? What was the star? And again, there's all kinds of theories. You can look it up. I'm not really sure. Some people say, oh, there was this alignment of planets that showed up like this really bright solitary star. Some people say it was like a supernova. Some people just say, hey, is this supernatural? If God could lead Israel by a cloud by day and a fire by night, it was just this supernatural phenomenon that they saw. We're not sure. But here's the deal. They weren't really after the star, were they, right? They were after who the star represented. They say, we saw his star in the east. They were not just after this miraculous phenomenon, whatever was going on. They were after who the star represented. There's a prophecy in Numbers 24, verse 7. It says, a star will come out of Jacob. A scepter will rise out of Israel. Now, Matthew points out, again, we're going to get a little nerdy here, but I think this is really cool, and this is actually quite important. Matthew points out, remember Psalm 126, that these men were from the east, that direction, from the east. They were from the east, and again, you got to kind of picture, maybe I should have had a map here. They're from the east, and they're moving west. Where? To where? To Jerusalem. Why might that possibly be significant? Really interesting. In the Bible, the idea of the east, again, this isn't like condemning a direction on a map. It's a concept, okay? The idea, especially in the Old Testament Hebrew scriptures, when it talks about the east, it's often representing a place of separation from God, of punishment, and of exile. Okay? So follow me. When Adam and Eve sinned and were put out of the garden, where does it say that God put them? On the east side of the garden. When Cain killed his brother Abel, where did God banish him? To the east, to farther east. The Israelites are sent to Babylon. Where is that? It's to the east. So you always get this picture of judgment and separation and punishment happening to the east. They're sent away from Israel. They're sent away from Jerusalem. They're sent away from Eden. Right? So Daniel, when he is in Babylon, what does he do? He prays toward Jerusalem. He prays in that, if you're thinking the map there, he's looking west, right? Yet now these magi say, we saw a star in the east. And they're moving from the east to the west toward Jerusalem. Okay, so this is kind of cool. God's all about the details. This is interesting. So, the temple is set up in Jerusalem, in Zion. And they call it a mountain. It's kind of a hill. The temple is set up in a very specific direction. So, the high priest comes in, and he enters the holy place. And then there's an inner sanctuary. He only goes in there once a year to offer on this Day of Atonement, to offer sacrifices in the Holy of Holies, where God's special presence dwells. What direction is he heading? Some of you are like, I'm not good with directions. What direction is he heading? He's heading purposely from the east to the west. He's heading west because the picture is banished out of Eden, banished farther, exiled to Babylon. So now they are heading, the high priest heads from that separation, from that judgment, symbolically back to Eden, back to God's presence, back to God's fellowship. Okay, you follow me? It's kind of cool, right? So now these guys are heading from the east to Jerusalem. Moving east to west toward Jerusalem would be a signal of moving from separation, from judgment, from exile, back to God. But in the temple, what the Jews knew, the only way you're actually able to do this, the only way you could ever get into the Holy of Holies, we're sinners. God's a holy God, is through this blood sacrifice. You had to sacrifice animals to move in that direction toward God. But now these men, these Gentile foreigners, are moving toward Jesus, toward Emmanuel, God with us, who is also, as John the Baptist says, the Lamb of God who takes away the sins of the world. Okay, so I'll ask you real quick, in what ways does Matthew hold Herod and the Magi in contrast? Herod is the king of Judea, the king of the Jews, even though he's not ethnically Jewish. And he hears about another king who is actually really is ethnically Jewish, is from the royal line of David. He's not even aware of where the Messiah is going to be born. He doesn't even know. He's like, hey, Bible nerds, can you please tell me where Messiah will be born? Why is he so clueless? Again, there's a little bit of conjecture here. Why is he so clueless? Listen, there are things that we can do in practice that either make us more or less clueless about God's will, God's way, God's plan. And apparently Herod was all about Herod. And it seems that Herod, when you read his story in the Bible, when you read his story, is very much just about my power, my wealth. And I will do everything I can to protect my power and my wealth. This was his treasure. And Jesus says in the Sermon on the Mount, listen, where your treasure is, what's most valuable to you, what consumes your mind and your heart, that's where your heart will be also, right? That's where your affections will be. That's where you'll be consumed. That's where your focus will be. That's where your devotion will be. That's where your allegiance will be. Herod had a treasure. Power, status, wealth. It's revealing here. He's clueless because that is where his heart is, right? So it's a good question. Where's my treasure? Where's my attention? Where's my focus? Where's my devotion? Where's my allegiance? Am I doing that which tunes me out to the things of God? Am I doing that which I'm walking with the Spirit? I'm walking in His Word. That tunes me into the things of God. Herod inquires with ill intent from these Bible scholars where Messiah will be born. They say that the prophets foretell his birthplace. He's going to be born in this little village. Jerusalem is the hub. Jerusalem is the hub of social life, of worship. That's the center. But yeah, Messiah is going to be born in this little village, this little town, this little city. It's very humble. It's very small. It's seemingly insignificant, but it is known as Bethlehem. And David was born there. He will be a descendant of David. And once Herod is made aware that New Testament, Old Testament, that all that the Old Testament points to has been fulfilled, He's disturbed. He's disturbed. The real King of the Jews has come. And then Matthew says all Jerusalem is disturbed with him. Now, what does that mean? Is there a little bit of a hyperbole here? All of Jerusalem? Is he talking about the religious leaders that he just inquired from? Is he talking about the people that saw this big caravan coming in? These men, the picture is they've come a long, 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 long way. Pagan foreigners. Jerusalem, Bethlehem are only 5 or 6 miles apart. Even these religious people, a lot of you sitting here might say, "Oh yeah, I follow Jesus. I love Jesus. I love God. These are like the most religious people you can imagine. They know the scriptures inside and out, and they're told, "Hey, guess what? Messiah's come. He's just about 5 or 6 miles away." Who goes? Who goes to check it out? The strangers. It's so hard for us to appreciate this. The scholars, the religious people, the king of the Jews, quote unquote, Herod, none of them go. They're only disturbed. John 1, right? John 1, 11 and 12. I've read this recently. John says, he, that being Jesus, what he calls the Word in that chapter, came to that which was his own. But his own did not receive him. Yet to all who did receive him, to those who believed in his name, he gave the right to become children of God. Right? So in contrast, these pagan astrologers have become aware of the birth of this new king. Now, this is not advocating or encouraging the practice of astrology. In fact, the Bible consistently condemns all such pagan divination. But that's just what makes us so shocking. That's exactly what makes us so shocking. It's not the people of the Hebrew Scriptures. It's not the people of God's temple in Jerusalem. It's not the people that he's revealed himself throughout the centuries and been faithful to for generations that are pictured as perceiving and seeking Jesus. It's the Gentiles. It's the pagan foreigners. If you were a Jew in the first century reading Matthew, you'd be like, oh, as these Gentiles are believing in Jesus and flooding into the church and forming this spiritual Israel. This again tells us that God has come not just to save Israel, but to save all people. Listen, we want to put God in tight boxes. God can do this and not this. God can. Now, he's never going to do anything that's opposed to his own character. We like to put people in boxes. Oh, this person probably would be a good candidate to come to faith in Jesus. They're so nice. They're probably half a step away, right? And then we go, oh, but that guy, oh, that gal, oh, they would never. Well, the Jews had a whole lot of they would nevers, right? They would never. And here comes this caravan. God cares enough to reveal himself to people where they're at. And sometimes in ways that would shock and disturb us. That would be so far out of our box. The author R.T. France says, God's use of their astrological and cultural background to communicate with them does not imply his endorsement of astrology, but it indicates his care in meeting individuals where they are. Can God still do this? Does God still do this? Are you willing to be surprised by what God will do to meet someone, maybe even you, where you are? They were searching, and to a genuine searcher, God will be found. Isaiah 55:6, seek the Lord while he may be found. Call on him while he is near. Jeremiah 29:13, you will seek me and find me when you seek me with all your heart. Matthew 7:7, Jesus says, ask and it will be given to you. Seek and you will find. Knock and the door will be open to you. He's not talking about like, can I have a Mercedes? No, he's saying, seek me, ask of me, seek me out. And I will show up. These men traveled tremendous distances to find and worship Jesus. And unsurprisingly, they first come to where? Jerusalem. They come to Jerusalem. This is the center. This is where God, the God of the Jews, is worshiped. All right. Follow me here. Isaiah, at the end of Isaiah sees this new Jerusalem, this new temple, this glorious future Jerusalem, this new temple. Listen to the wording here. He says this in chapter 60. Arise. Listen to the words, the symbolism. Arise, shine, for your light has come. And the glory of Yahweh rises upon you. See, darkness covers the earth, and thick darkness is over the peoples. But the Lord, or Yahweh, rises upon you, and his glory appears over you. Nations will come to your light, the kings to the brightness of your dawn. What's interesting is the sun rises in the east. Oh, we're headed west. There's a light here. Okay, you got it. This stuff is like, it's not on accident. There's a sun. Oh, wow, the sun is so bright, so brilliant, so glorious. This light outshines the sun. You get it? I mean, it's cool stuff. Lift up your eyes and look about you. All assemble and come to you. Your sons come from afar, and your daughters are carried on arm. Then you will look and be radiant. Your heart will throb and swell with joy, and the wealth on the seas will be brought to you. To you, the riches of the nations will come. Again, talking about New Jerusalem, talking about new temple. Herds of camels will come cover your land. And then he says, young camels from Midian and Ephah, and all from Sheba will come bearing gold and incense and proclaiming the praise of the Lord of Yahweh. All Kedar's flocks will be gathered to you. The rams of Nebaioth will serve you, and they will be accepted as offerings on my altar, and I will adorn my glorious temple. I'll skip down just 2 more verses. The glory of Lebanon will come to you, the pine, the fir, the cypress together, and to adorn the place of my sanctuary. And I will glorify the place of my feet. The sons of your oppressors, Babylon, Assyria, the sons of your oppressors will come, bowing before you. All who despise you will bow down at your feet and will call you the city of the Lord, Zion, the Holy One of Israel. The Magi go to Jerusalem. Of course they go to Jerusalem. Is he there? No, he's not there. He's not there. He's 5-6 miles away. Why? What is Matthew signaling? The New Jerusalem, the new temple. Is it a place? If it is, I mean, maybe that's part of it. But more than anything, the Bible is not saying the New Jerusalem and the new temple is all about a place. It's about a person. It's a person. Jerusalem, the temple, it's where God meets with man. It's where sacrifices are made so God and man can be reconciled, so they can live together, so they can be reunited, so there can be fellowship forever, so God can be their people. And the people, that they'll say, that's my God. That's not all about a place. That's about a person. John says, the Apostle John says that this God made himself flesh and he dwelled among us. He tabernacled among us before the temple was made, and the Israelites were mobile, right? This tabernacle moved wherever they went, and it was always in the center of the camp because God is with his people. Now Jesus has come and he has made his dwelling, or he's tabernacled among us. He's not in Jerusalem. It's not about a place. It's about a person. Like, oh. Jesus is Emmanuel, God with us. Jesus is where humans come together to be with God. And the contrast is so striking. And I believe this tension between Herod and the Magi is something that we all have to grapple with. And it's like this question, is Jesus a threat? Is Jesus a threat to my own power? Is Jesus a threat to my own agenda? A threat to the stuff that I want? Is he a threat to my treasure? Yeah, he is. Or is Jesus worthy of me seeking him, of surrendering, of giving my true worship, my true allegiance, my sacrifice? These are questions that are being asked here. All right, finally, and I'll do this much more quickly, the last few verses here, verses 9 through 12. After they had heard the king, they went on their way, and the star they had seen in the east went ahead of them until it stopped over the place where the child was. When they saw the star, they were overjoyed. The joy candle, that's fitting. On coming to the house, they saw the child with his mother Mary, and what did they do? What do they do? They bow down, right? It's that word for worship. They bowed down and worshiped him, and they opened their treasures and presented him with gifts of gold and incense and myrrh. And having been warned in a dream not to go back to Herod, good idea, they returned to their country by another route. Okay. Anything jump out at you there? Yeah, God surprises us again and again in this story. We have the surprise of the Magi themselves, these unexpected seekers and worshipers. And then we have this unexpected king, not found in a palace in Jerusalem, but he's a humble child. He's in a humble city. He's very likely in a very humble home and found amongst humble working class parents. The King of Kings and the Lord of Lords, Jesus said, did not come to be served, but to serve. How different that is from the leaders, right, that we see. He did not come to be served, but to serve and to give his life as a ransom for many. When they find Jesus, they are overjoyed. If Jesus is a threat to my power and my treasure, then he's a fearful disturbance. He's a fearful disturbance. He's something that I will want to do away with. But if my posture is a seeking journey that desires to bow down and worship, then his presence is a joy. It's a joy. They're overjoyed. What is the Lord to you? Is there any work that has to go on there? Is it fear? What are you going to take away from me? What are you going to do? What are you going to ask me to do? I got my own stuff. Or is it like, let me worship you? And worship they do. What a scene this must have been. Oh man, what a scene. This caravan of these pagan astrologers, dressed different, talking different, and they come to this little town, to this little house, this little humble place, and they see this child, and they just bow down. Can you imagine that? Can you imagine that scene? The disciples, the storm is calmed, raging, they think they're going to die. And then Jesus says, muzzles the storm. Quiet. The storm stops. And they worship. Only God is worthy of worship. A blind man receives his sight from Jesus, and he worships. The women at the empty tomb see Jesus, and they worship. Doubting Thomas comes face to face with his risen Savior, and he proclaims, "My Lord and my God," and he worships him. This awestruck adoration that compels me to grateful, loving devotion is the only appropriate response. And their worship is sacrificial. Where Herod's afraid of what he might lose, these Gentile worshipers freely give what they believe this king deserves. Like Queen Sheba coming to King Solomon, if you know that story, right? Bringing gifts from her kingdom, they pay tribute to the King of Kings. Psalm 72, 10, 11. The kings of Tarshish and of distant shores will bring tribute to him. The kings of Sheba and Seba will present him with gifts. All kings will bow down to him, and all nations will serve him. The author Michael Green, and I'm going to land the plane here, says, gold is the gift fit for a king. And the king in baby's clothes was there. Frankincense was in constant use by the priests in the temple. And the ultimate priest, the one who would make final reconciliation between God and humankind, lay before them. Myrrh was used to embalm the dead. The man born to be king was the man born to die. In those three gifts, we see who he is, what he came to do, and what it cost him. And like the wise men, we bow in wonder before a God who could love us that much. And all of these gifts, not coincidentally, gold, frankincense, and myrrh, are all mentioned in the Old Testament Hebrew Scriptures in connection with the Jerusalem temple. So finally, the Magi dupe Herod. They're warned by God to do so. We're instructed to obey our authorities, but there's also many examples of the fact that there are times not to obey when what they're calling for runs amok of God's standards, God's will, God's way, God's love, especially when it threatens the welfare of others, especially when it threatens the welfare of the most vulnerable. The Magi are a powerful example of putting Jesus in his right place. The local political puppet, King Herod, is not the real king of this story. Jesus is. Is Jesus in the right place in your life? They made it their priority. Herod, the scribes, they wouldn't go 5 or 6 miles. They couldn't be bothered. They made it their priority to seek him, journeying countless miles. Their worship was appropriately costly. They gave him their best. Their example, I think, leads us to ponder questions that Emelina actually posed a couple weeks ago at worship. How far would you go? What would you give? No one else can seek him for you. No one else can worship him for you. Is he worth your life's journey? Is he worth your time, your agenda, new priorities, new focus? Is he worth your gifts? Is he worth your talents? Is he worth your allegiance, your devotion, your life's genuine worship? Father God, this morning we recognize the cliche that's so true, that wise men still seek him. That wise men and women indeed seek you while you may be found. Lord, help us, quicken us, reveal yourself to us, even in surprising ways, even in ways that are outside of our box, that we may seek you with all of our hearts. And may our lives themselves become sacrifices of worship to our King. Pray this in Jesus' mighty name. Amen.